Joined now by a frequent visitor on Fridays, especially during the regular season. He's a weekly guest, but he's even carves out time for us in the offseason, especially as we lead up to the draft. We're going to talk a little free agency with the senior producer from NFL Films, Greg Cosell, as the Bills had a relatively busy first week. They spent the run-up to free agency signing some of their young core players to extensions, and then got kind of busy on both sides of the ball in free agency here in week number one. Greg, thanks for joining us, first of all. And second, I want to start kind of on the defensive side of the ball. That's where more of the signings took place. And I guess we'll start with the headliner, Joey Bosa. We know he's been compromised. His effectiveness has been compromised on the field by injury the last few years. But just in terms of pure skill set, where do you come down on Joey Bosa?
I think pure skill set, he's still a really good edge pass rusher. He's a really good run defender. The issue, as you mentioned, Brownie, has been injuries, and obviously availability is a critical factor, as we all know. Every coach would tell you that. My sense is, though, that with this particular team, with Rousseau, who they re-signed, with Epinesa still there, that you're probably not looking for him to play 50 or 60 snaps a game. And hopefully the durability factor can be massaged a bit, because he certainly can be a factor as an edge pass rusher. We spoke about the fact last year a number of times that was an area that they needed. They needed that one guy. And Rousseau's a really nice player. I'm not sure he'd be viewed as the guy that's your dominant edge pass rusher, although he has those moments. So I think that, to me, it's a really good signing, given who else they have, because I would assume, and I don't know what Sean McDermott has said, if anything at all, up to this point, but I would assume they don't anticipate playing him 60, 65 snaps a game.
Yeah, we haven't heard from Sean McDermott yet, but that's what Steve Tasker and I have been saying on the show all week, is that we kind of see him stepping into not being Von Miller, but playing similar snaps, and that, hey, we're going to use you here when we need you right now. Another defensive player that the Bills haven't signed yet, but agreed to terms, is Michael Hoecht on a 3-year deal, and this is a type of defensive lineman who has played edge rusher, linebacker, slot corner. He lines up everywhere. How does his versatility help elevate Buffalo's defense?
I love Michael Hoecht. I mean, I've obviously been watching the Rams for years, and you nailed it, man. He lines up everywhere. He's an incredibly intelligent player. He's one of those guys that is a little bit better athlete than people might think. He's really disciplined in how he plays. He's terrific at setting things up for others. He understands his role, but yet he can make plays on his own. Actually, when I saw that signing, which I think happened before Bosa, or it was announced before Bosa, I guess, as you said, it's not official. Some of these are not officially signed yet, but I think it was announced before Bosa, if memory serves me correctly.
Yeah.
And I just thought to myself, that is a really good signing. This is the kind of player you want on your defense, not just because he's so versatile in how he can align, but because he's such an intelligent, smart, savvy player.
Yeah, and as Steve says all the time, smart players play a long time in this league. My question about Hoecht centers around his pass rushing skills, because people kind of just automatically assume, oh, he'll probably be like Ed Oliver's rotational backup at the 3 technique. And he does a lot more than that. What do you see from his pass rush skill set? How would you describe him in that way?
I mean, he's not a dominant pass rusher,
Right.
although he can rush the quarterback, but he can also play off the ball. It's going to be really interesting. And obviously, they have a plan, or they would not have signed him. So we don't know what that plan is. They're not going to make a big announcement about it. But I'm curious to see how they choose to deploy him within the context of the defense. Don't forget, Hoyt's close to 270 pounds. They're light at linebacker in their nickel with Milano and Bernard. You could see some changes in their nickel. You could just see some changes in how they deploy personnel. Obviously, we don't know that. They certainly, as I said, have a plan. You don't make a signing like that without having a sense of what you're going to do, Brownie. But I think that remains to be seen. I don't think he's going to be used as an edge pass rusher or, as his number one thing or as an inside pass rusher as his only thing. I think you're
Right.
going to see him be deployed in the way he was with the Rams. And that's one reason you sign him because he can do all those things.
Right, and that's why I was asking if you could shed some light on his pass rushing skill set, only because we've seen in previous years both Bernard and Milano used as blitzers in sub
Yeah.
packages, and I could see Hoyt being utilized that way to maybe take some of that workload off of those two linebackers
Yes.
with all the snaps that they
Yeah.
log. So in that kind of a role, what as a blitzer, I guess, for lack of a better term, in a sub package, how effective is he
Yeah.
in that kind of way?
Yeah, he's good at that. I mean, and he's also really good. Look, one of the things we saw a ton with the Rams this year, in particular, when they had the rookie lineman, and it wouldn't surprise me. Look, every year you tweak certain things. Okay, you play a certain way, but you tweak. One of the things the Rams did really, really well a year ago was line up in what we call loaded fronts, where they'd have three defensive linemen to one side of the center, and then they'd have a wide nine pass rusher on the other side, and Michael Hoecht would kind of be the guy that was sort of a stand-up three technique, jumping in and out opposite the load. He would try to engage the guard so the guard couldn't help with stunts on the other side. He's really good at those little nuances, those little details that help others make plays in addition to himself at times. So again, we don't know because it's obviously March, and no one needs to say anything. But I wouldn't be surprised to see a few tweaks and adjustments in how they play, out of their nickel in the pure pass situations.
Sean McDermott said at the combine, we always need to be evolving as a defense. We want to be
Yep.
5 years ahead of what offenses are doing. And you see offenses now catching up to how defenses have played over the last 5 years. You see running backs being used a little bit more now. And maybe this Michael Hoyt signing, like you said, his versatility is a way that Buffalo's defense can evolve. Another defensive lineman that has agreed to terms with the Buffalo Bills, not officially signed yet, is a defensive tackle, Larry Ogunjobi. And the defensive tackle room for Buffalo saw several players hit free agency in Quentin Jefferson, Austin Johnson, as well as Jordan Phillips. So there's a need there for defensive tackle.
Yeah.
What does Ogunjobi bring to the table?
Ogunjobi's your classic rotational D tackle. He's probably a base defense D tackle, but he's a really solid player. He's just, he's one of those guys you want in your D tackle rule. He's not going to play 65 snaps a game. He's not a pass rusher. They didn't sign him for that, Maddie. They signed him to be a rotational player within the context of who they have. They still have Jones and Oliver. Dwayne Carter is going into his second season. So, he's there as a rotational player, and he's always been very, very good in that role. He's just one of those guys, those kinds of players no one really thinks about or talks about because they don't necessarily record sacks, but they're critical for every defense.
Yeah. On the offensive side of the ball, we see Josh Palmer.
Yeah.
And look, there is speed on that at that position, Curtis Samuel, although he's not used down the field all that much. Palmer would seem to represent field stretching. Is he good enough to still do that?
Brownie, Palmer's one of those guys that I'm not, I wasn't out there. I think earlier this week, if I'm not mistaken, you guys spoke to Tom Telesco, who was the GM
Yep.
at the time. I was actually out there the year they drafted Palmer, when they were still in Costa Mesa as their facility, and talked to Tom Telesco because I loved Josh Palmer coming out of Tennessee. And I thought he could be a really, really good NFL receiver, about 6'1", 210. I remember when they played Alabama when he was at Tennessee, and he ran by Patrick Surtain twice, and he has vertical speed. And again, without being there, I certainly can't speak to the reasons why it hasn't happened. But you're dealing with a guy that has a lot of traits, and he does have vertical ability. So maybe he just needed to change his scenery. I don't know the answer. I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to catch 90 balls for 1,400 yards. Who knows? But this guy has traits, and they were evident from when he came out of Tennessee. They've been evident at times when he's been with the Chargers. I don't have a brilliant answer as to why it hasn't happened. But, as I said, maybe a change of scenery brings out those traits.
And I love that they're getting a player who's just entering his 5th NFL season in Joshua Palmer. It's not like this guy's in year 9 or 10. You're getting a guy who you can still help develop in ways. And if you can get that out of him, how does a receiver like Palmer, who has a lot of upside or had a lot of upside coming out of the draft, how can he help elevate Buffalo's offense as a whole?
Well, you're hoping for the vertical element because they did not really have a vertical element this past year. And they were pretty condensed. And I think Joe Brady played that way intentionally. And of course, that helped limit the turnovers with Josh only throwing 6 interceptions. But when you have a quarterback like Josh, you do want to have a vertical dimension in your pass game because he can make those throws. And Keon Coleman is not really that guy. He can make some contested catches, but he's not the kind of speed guy that's going to get on top of the defense. Palmer can do that. So I think that just elevates your pass game because it makes it, Matty, just you have to defend it differently as a defense. So again, I'm sure they didn't pay a ton. I don't follow the money because the money becomes the money. It's just what it is. That's what free agency is about. It's about guys getting a lot of money. So I don't worry about the money numbers. But I just think it's a guy who has really higher level traits that just for whatever reason not been able to come out yet. And he does have vertical ability. And now when you look at Palmer, we know what Shakir is. Hopefully Keon Coleman's development continues. Maybe Samuel becomes a little bit of a movable chess piece within the context of the offense. So you're just looking for dimensions. You want to make sure your offense has every dimension so that you can win multiple ways any given Sunday.
Yeah. And at least on paper, it would appear, with the Palmer addition, the reports of Laviska Shenault also entering the fold, that they can threaten all 3 levels of a defense with the receiving core that they have now.
Yeah, Brownie, that's what you want to be able to do. Just like I said, you don't want to be in a situation. Look, we know the run game's been a lot better. We know that Josh Allen can make special plays at any time. But just when you talk philosophically about putting together an offense, you want to feel that you can attack, just like you said, and you're right, all 3 dimensions, and you want to feel that you can win multiple ways depending on how a game goes, because you never know how a game goes. Every team goes in with a plan, but good coaches always have plan B and plan C, and sometimes plan A for whatever reason doesn't work. And you need to be able to do any number of different things depending on how a specific Sunday plays out.
Yeah.
And then adding to Buffalo's defense, they did add to their DB room in safety Darrick Forrest. Now, this is also a younger player who in 2022 had a standout season with 4 interceptions. He played a lot during that season, and talking to him yesterday, he said, I think I fell off there because I wasn't playing as much. Hopefully, I get to do the same in Buffalo. He knows he's going to be competing for a role here in Buffalo. How do you evaluate his tape?
Yeah, I remember him in 2022. He was a good player for Washington that year. He played both on the back end. He played up in the box a bit. I remember doing him when he came out of the University of Cincinnati. He always struck me as he's not the best athlete on the field, but he's a savvy player. He's an aware player. That to me was the strength of his game. He understood his role, his responsibility. He played with discipline. Obviously you're always looking for a guy who's a great athlete. There's not that many of them at the safety position, but we'll see how the safety position shakes out. I mean, as we speak today, they still have Rapp and Hamlin, correct? Didn't Hamlin re-sign a 1-year deal?
He did, yeah.
And so is Rapp still under contract?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then you got Cole Bishop too.
They have Rapp, Hamlin, Bishop, and Forrest. So they've got a nice 4-man competition for the safety position, and we'll see how that shakes out. We don't know how it's going to shake out right now. Obviously, they felt they wanted to bring another safety into the mix, and Forrest, he was a starter for Washington in 2022, so he played a lot of snaps.
Right, and taking this just a hair further, Greg, getting back to the conversation about trends and changing your defense, big nickel seems to be something that's going to be on the uptick even more this coming season as defenses try to battle the advent of the resurgence of the run game. and bigger players running at small nickel corners. There's a need to be bigger in the nickel package. Where might Forrest factor in there? Because I know earlier in his career, there were times where he did play closer to the line of scrimmage as well.
Yes, Forrest factors in there. Bishop would factor in there. I mean, I think they are now equipped to do just what you said, Brownie, and that's a great point. More and more teams do play big nickel with 3 safeties as opposed to having the smaller nickel linebacker. As good as Teron Johnson's been, and he's been phenomenal in his career, and he's a very good run defender, by the way, but the fact is he's not as big as a safety. So, I think that one of those guys, it could be Bishop, it could be Forrest, they could easily be there in a big nickel look. And you're right about the run game. We'll see if that continues to be a trend. We saw the run game come back to the league a little bit last year in 2024. We'll see if that continues in 2025.
So, Greg, we're through this first wave of free agency. Buffalo got in the mix right away with some of these players. As we talk about these new additions to Buffalo's roster, what do you learn about what the Bills are going to look like in 2025?
Well, the changes, I mean, with the exception of really Palmer, which as we discussed, was important, most of the changes occurred here on defense. And I think we had spoken about that. I remember Brownie speaking with you about the fact that was the side of the ball that they needed to make some changes. And obviously, I wasn't saying anything out of school. The tape tells you that, and they know it too. So that's where they focused their attention. And, that's where I think ideally the difference will be. So, offensively, look, the offensive line is the same. The backs are the same. Obviously, the quarterback's the same. So, offensively, you'll see some tweaks, I'm sure, because Palmer will necessitate some, but the offense essentially is going to be the same from a personnel perspective. It's the defense that needed some tweaks and adjustments, and some minor, some more major, and I think you're going to see that.
And then the last one, Greg, before we let you go, obviously the Bills did some work before free agency in signing some young core players to extensions. Obviously, Josh was the big one, but you also got Rousseau in the fold long-term, Terrell Bernard in the fold long-term, Khalil Shakir was done during Combine Week when we had a chance to talk to you. Which one of those kind of excites you the most in terms of where that player could take his career?
Oh, boy. That's a hard one. I'm only going to answer it. The answer I'm going to give you doesn't mean I don't think the other guy's a good player. So I don't want fans listening to think, oh, you don't like this guy, because, you get that a lot. But as you guys know, I was always a big fan of Shakir based on his college tape. Because for me, it's not personal. I don't know these players. So I'm just watching tape. And I remember watching him at Boise and really thinking that this guy could be a really good pro. He was an inside-outside player at Boise. Obviously settled into mostly being a slot guy with the Bills. But I just think Shakir, in the context of this offense and the connection he's developed with Josh Allen, again, I'm not going to sit here and throw out numbers. Who knows what, that doesn't mean anything to me. If he catches 70 balls, he's the same receiver as if he catches 90 balls. It doesn't mean he's a different receiver. But I really like Khalil Shakir, and I think that he's a really important part of this offense.
All right, Greg, thanks for the insight as always. We'll catch up with you next Friday. We'll probably swing our pendulum back towards the draft class a little bit here and maybe tackle another position with you.
Well, I've only done about 200 guys, Brownie. So
is that all?
Yeah, you need to get some work done in the interim.
All right, we'll see if you can get to 220 by next Friday. Good luck.
All right, sounds good, guys. Appreciate it.